Hello, welcome to my live stream today. I have a treat for you today. I'm going to share with you my new friend, Lyn Barrett. She is a retired teacher, principal, and pastor, and also an expert on dissociative identity disorder, also known as D.I.D. And for those of you who are new to me, I am Danielle Burnock from danielleburnock.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive, that lady on the internet who loves you. And that's why I share these interviews with you so you can learn about other people and situations in the world. And if you are dealing with any of these things, or you have a friend, you can share these messages of encouragement and hope with other people. And so I'm going to bring my friend Lyn in here so you can meet her. I'm so excited for this today. Thank you, Lyn, for joining me today. I am so excited to share your expertise with my audience on dissociative identity disorder. I think a lot of people have never heard of it, also called DID or D.I.D. And I just want to thank you for your time and for opening your heart to my audience today.
Well, thank you so much, Danielle. It's really an honor for me to be here to talk to you and to talk to your audience. And I hope that by sharing a little bit of my story and answering your questions, that I will help people learn more about this unique, but not necessarily so rare condition.
Yeah, people think it's rare. A lot of things they don't have in their own life or that we don't know about. So let's start with, I know that you told me you don't remember a whole lot about your childhood. So what was your life like before you got your diagnosis of DID?
Sure, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. I will just touch back on my childhood, that I don't have a lot of concrete memories. I do remember as an adolescent feeling very defective and very unsure of myself. I never dated because my lips trembled when I was around boys. And so I pretty much kept to myself. But I did manage to create a nice life for myself. When I was a junior in college, I met a man that seemed to be a nice man, and he and I fell in love, and we got married, and we had 4 wonderful children. And he was becoming a college professor, and so I was the proverbial stay-at-home mom, and nothing was more important to me than my children. And so during that period of my life, I'd say in my 20s and early 30s, I was living in a fantasy land of wonderfulness. You know, life was really great. But somewhere in the mid 30s, things started to peel away, and I didn't understand what they were or what was happening. But I would experience sort of a feeling of unreality. I would get triggered over things, and back then I didn't know what that word was or what it meant. But you know, for instance, when I went to school to become a teacher, and this was after I'd had children, and they were still relatively young, but I was going to school for my certification, and you know, my supervising teacher didn't like what I was doing. And so instead of just rolling with it, it just peeled me apart. And I felt incredibly exposed and incredibly defective. And I felt like I was a fake and I shouldn't even be doing this. So my life was really lovely for a while. And then it started to be not so lovely. And I didn't understand why it wasn't so lovely. And my wonderful children were starting to have some issues of their own. And my husband, who is my ex-husband, was not home nearly as much as he used to be. And so I was trying to hold the whole bowl of wax together by myself. I did learn that he had an affair, and that blew me apart. Now, I want to say that learning that your husband has an affair will blow any woman apart, you know.
Uh-huh.
And for a man to learn that his wife is having an affair will blow a man apart. So many of these things that were happening to me happened to many people. And I kept thinking, why aren't I handling this better? Why can't I manage this? And yet I couldn't. So that's the bottom line, is that I was having a really difficult time managing my own inner turmoil, which felt like chaos, and the issues that having of being a single parent and having an ex-spouse who was very, very mean at that time. He was very angry at me because he was having an affair. And
That doesn't make any sense.
Well, you'd have to ask him about that question, but I'm trying to just build the sense of misery that was in that I was carrying, and that my children were, of course, picking up because of that, and that my ex-husband in his own way was carrying this as well. So I would share some of the symptoms that I experienced before being diagnosed.
Is that what led to your diagnosis, is all the symptoms?
Well, yes. Yes, and I'll give you some specific examples in a minute. So I didn't feel like myself. I didn't know who I was. And they call that identity confusion, but I didn't know what that meant. But I didn't feel like myself. And I felt unreal. And I sometimes felt like I was in the corner of a room looking down on me, this wretched woman who didn't know how to manage these children that she loved so much. I had multiple streams of voices going on in my head, but I didn't know that. I thought it was just chaos. It just felt like inner chaos. And I had body pain everywhere. My whole body throbbed. My skin throbbed. I didn't know what that was all about, but that's what we call body memory. It's holding decades of memory of hurt and harm that happened when you were a very young child. But I had no idea what that was.
Yeah, like that book, The Body Keeps the Score.
That's a wonderful book. Yes, and that's on the side of my bed table, because it really does explain all that. And catatonia. Meaning that I would just roll up into a ball in bed and pull the covers over my head, be in a fetal position. I worked so hard for my children to make their life more stable because of the divorce, but I appeared to be very ineffective with that, and they were having myriads of issues as well. And although my ex-husband loved them very much, and he did do things with them, he did everything he could to make it hard for me to do for them what needed to be done. I had suicidal ideation, and I attempted suicide once. When I came out of the hospital after having attempted suicide by taking pills and overdosing, I had a part of me was saying, you're alive, let's seize the day, and another part of me was saying, what a wimp, you can't even commit suicide right. You're pathetic. So I had these different kinds of voices going on in my head. So I should explain to people that during this time, I was a teacher, and I actually helped some parents start a Quaker school. I eventually became the full-time head of that school. Once I knew that my husband and I were going to divorce, I moved into public education because I knew I needed to make a better salary. And so I was an elementary school teacher, and then I went on to become a school principal. So I want you to
How are you able to
that's
hold
the thing.
down these kind of jobs?
That's that was a part of being multiple, is I had parts that were total victims and unable to move or accomplish anything. And I had other parts that, boom, could go right out there and do everything, you know? And so that's, that was the, one of the disorienting things, is that I felt like I was worthless and I wanted to die, but I also felt really competent and able to, you know, conquer the world. And how do you manage those two?
That's chaos right there, those two in
chaos.
conflict.
Yes, it was chaos right there. I 2 years after I well, it was interesting. So the year that I attempted suicide, nobody knew about it. Of course, this was all kept quiet. And so the school, the Quaker school, actually made me the head of school. And there was another sort of disconnected reality, that I was attempting suicide, but I also became the head of this school, and
Wow.
you know, was able to lead and manage and move the school forward. So I went to therapy, but it was very disjointed and not really, I mean, nobody knew what was wrong with me. You know, it was just like, it just seemed like nobody knew what was wrong with me. And so I had a breakdown one day in my backyard, writing a letter to my therapist, telling her that I wanted to die, and this time I was going to do it, and I was going to be successful at it. And so different parts of me came up and wrote in different handwritings all of these crazy things in this letter, including scribbles all across the page. And I mailed it off to her. And then, of course, you know, she encouraged me to go to the hospital. And I went. It was many people with D.I.D have some really unhelpful and severe hospitalization experiences. But that was not true for me. I was in a really wonderful women's unit. We did not know I had D.I.D. We just knew that this was this woman who had a lot of things in her court, and yet she was falling apart. And so the hospitalization was really helpful in stabilizing me. And when I came out of the 30 days, I had a new job. I was no longer going to be leading the Quaker school. I knew that I couldn't. I knew that my emotional stability wouldn't allow me to continue that. So I had a job in a public school. I moved to a new town a half an hour away. By this time, 2 of my 4 children were older and out, either at college or working. But my 2 younger children were, I'm trying to remember, maybe 13 and 15. And I knew that they needed consistent care. And I asked my ex-husband if he would take them to live with them, because I knew that I needed to work on myself, and I was worried that I wouldn't be able to provide for them what they needed. Well, he was willing to take my daughter, but not my son. So my son and I.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, we moved to this city about a half an hour away, and that is when I had to look for a new therapist. And I found a new therapist who was experienced with dissociative disorders. And so it was while I was working with her, about a year after my hospitalization, that I was diagnosed. So this has been a long answer to your story about what led up to the diagnosis, or what my life was like to the diagnosis. But actually, so I hope that was helpful.
Oh, yeah. Well, how did that diagnosis make you feel? How did you respond to that? Was it relieving? Was it upsetting? Was it both?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it's very shocking and hard to incorporate into your sense of self for most people. But and that's true for me too. But on another level, I felt relief. because I truly felt crazy. I couldn't make any sense of anything that had been happening to me, mostly internally, but also externally. And I felt crazy. And so in getting that diagnosis, at least it helped me to understand, or at least have some understanding of why this might be happening to me. Now, I have to also say that I didn't believe it. And
Thank you for your honesty.
well, I want to, that's actually a symptom of D.I.D. Almost every person who is diagnosed with D.I.D. doesn't believe it, or they go in and out of periods of not believing it. We feel as if, oh, I must be faking this. I'm faking this, but these things keep happening. And so that's actually a part of the symptomology of D.I.D. is
Wow.
that the person who has it doesn't believe themselves. And the reason they don't believe themselves is because D.I.D. is caused by chronic early childhood trauma and abuse. And so when you're a little child, you need your caregivers. You need to believe they care about you. So when these kinds of things start happening to you and your caregivers are responsible or negligent, it's actually functional for the child to block it out and not remember it, because then the child can go back and continue to rely on that caregiver who gives them life. And it's very disconcerting or disorienting for a very small child, of course, to have a caregiver who loves them and who also abuses them. How do you put those two things together? It's really hard. And so that's why what happened in early childhood is functional and important in early childhood, that we responded in that way, but it's dysfunctional and totally unhelpful as an adult. So we have to unlearn all that. So part of what we had learned as a child was to not believe those things. Those things didn't happen, and so
I want to pause here and just draw attention to my audience. I want to pause on this moment of how that disassociation is a normal, functional response for a child, not as an adult, but as a child. And that's a reason why many people don't remember certain things from their childhood, because it was a normal, functional response. So anyone watching, listening, you have giant parts of your past that are missing. I implore you, look and see if there's a reason so that you can heal.
Thank you for emphasizing that.
Yes. I try to do that in the things that are real important, because we could just be talking and people can miss it because, we get involved in the story and it's like, no, there's a point to this. And so many people suffer because they don't remember. And so they think they don't remember, so it doesn't matter. But you have side effects to what you don't remember.
Exactly.
And that's what we need to focus on is, that's how you found your diagnosis, is you had all those side effects, came forward to the point where finally you found someone who could put the puzzle pieces together and say, aha, this is what we have. And still you had to struggle with taking ownership of that truth, because part of the dysfunction didn't want to believe it.
That's right.
I remember you told me in our talk before we did this about your relentless drive to know yourself, and that's how you heal. Why don't you share with us how did you heal from this, and how can other people heal from this?
Thank you.
If you want to go into more of what actually is D.I.D, you also called it a hidden disorder, but I think we kind of touched on that without the little title, but maybe we need that little title of hidden disorder, because we need to bring things to the light, because people can't heal what they can't see.
Well, I want to go back to what you said about how I wanted to know myself.
Mhm.
and to bring in the faith piece here just a little bit,
Oh, cool.
because I had been born and raised an atheist. My father had taught me that people who believe in God are either stupid or weak. And of course, I didn't want to be stupid or weak, so I didn't believe in God. But it was over this time that I began to uh, viscerally and emotionally need God, even if cognitively I couldn't believe in God. And I found that of course, I learned the Serenity Prayer when I was in the hospital. And I took the Serenity Prayer, which is, and I hope I don't mess it up, but God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I changed that for me. And it was, God, give me the courage, the strength, and the wisdom to know myself and do your will. And I didn't even believe in God when I created that prayer, but I prayed it over and over again, and it was so very important for me during my time of healing. I want to mention the altars, because that's another symptom, and it's the one that gets the most press. It's the most sensationalized part of D.I.D.
Right. Before we get into that, can we back up just to one of the things that you said? Because some people might not know the meaning of one of the words you used. You said that even though you didn't have the cognitive ability to believe in God, you needed him, you said, emotionally and viscerally.
Yes.
Viscerally is that internal stomach, gut, and that's the physical response to our emotional need. If you want to elaborate on that, but that's what I've learned, that visceral, that's, when you get butterflies in your stomach, you get the lump in your throat. It's the physical representation of an emotional need. So I wanted to elaborate on that term for people. If you want to elaborate on it, or if that's sufficient, then fine.
Well, thank you. And that's really good. The only thing I can add to that is that I felt, and again, here I am, had moved to a larger city and was a well-respected teacher in a public school system. And I knew that I would not make it through the day, that I felt like I would die if I didn't pray that prayer. That's
Wow.
how deep it was. It was
Wow.
just so visceral. At the same time, I could go out in the classroom and do a great job teaching, but internally, that's where it was visceral for me. The fire in the belly gut, or the fire in the belly death, as it might be called in my case. So yes, yeah.
Wow. And you wanted to elaborate on the altars. You wanted to talk about the altars.
Yeah, because there's
Like, define what is an altar. Where
good
people are like, what's an
question.
altar? What are we talking about? You said God, we talk about altars and God, and we're talking about your personalities, right? Or the identities.
Right. So altars can also be called insiders, or parts, or headmates. Different people call their parts different things.
Okay.
But the most common term is altars. So when I was a child, when someone with DID is a small child and is being um, uh, abused or exposed to trauma over and over again without any escape and nowhere to go, their brains are still forming. They're not fully formed until they're somewhere between 8 and 10 years old. So in that time from birth to maybe 7 years old or whatever, the brain has the capacity to actually cordon off some cognition, cordon off some memory. So it starts doing that just naturally in the face of trauma. But when the trauma happens over and over again, the barriers between the memories, the barriers between the senses of self get thicker and thicker, as the abuse continues and as the child grows. So that the child has, so the child who crawls up into his lap and is hurt hands the memory and the pain to someone else, so that same child can curl up on his lap and get hurt again, because the child also needs the comfort of knowing that this person is there and will protect them, and because the child needs
Right.
to have a caregiver. And so you'll have different parts hold different memories, but you also have these parts also, as you grow, they start to handle parts of characteristics, personality traits,
Mhm.
So in my case, I probably had about 20 alters. I am publishing my memoir, which will be published on January 3rd, 2022. And its title is Crazy: Reclaiming Life from the Shadow of Traumatic Memory. And let's see, what was I talking about before I went to the memoir?
The altars. You had about 20 of
yeah,
them.
I introduced 12 altars very, very clearly in the memoir, so you can get to know them and really kind of experience them as I experienced them, and what their functions were and what their roles were. So most people who have DID have what we call covert DID. And that means that we, because this is a hidden disorder, we don't let a whole lot of other people know about these different parts of us, So you may have a neighbor next door, or somebody that you met on the train, or a family member, or you might know people who have DID and have no clue that they have it, because unless you are very intimate with them, they are unlikely to reveal that to you. And in reality, they may not have even revealed it to themselves initially, because it takes 10 to 12 years for most people with DID to be accurately diagnosed. And there's a lot of resistance to that diagnosis, because we were programmed not to tell. We were programmed not to tell. So the research says that between 1 and 5% of the population worldwide has DID. That's comparable to the number of people who have bipolar disorder.
Wow.
But we hear about bipolar disorder. The only time we hear about DID is usually when it's sensationalized. So most of the time, you're not going to know that somebody has it unless you are very intimate with them, if you're married to them, or a deep, deep, deep close friend. It's nothing for you as an individual to be afraid of. The idea that DID people are violent is a misperception. Usually people with DID, if they are going to be violent, are violent against themselves, but not against other people, because our default mode is to become a victim ourselves. So we're not likely to be, I won't say it never happens, because I'm sure it does, but it's rare that we become perpetrators, because we're so busy being victims, really. So it is nothing to be afraid of. You can't fix the person with DID, but you can be a listener, and you can be a support person and love them, and you can encourage them to get treatment, because I hesitate to say you can never heal without treatment, because everyone is different, and there probably are some people out there who have achieved a level of peace without treatment. But I would say that for most of us, we need trauma-informed therapy, and real significant support and help during the most difficult time of treatment. So
Right.
I,
Yeah.
I could,
You had mentioned two different ways of healing. You said that you healed one way, but some people heal another way. Can you elaborate on those two different ways that someone can heal from DID?
sure. Well, it's not exactly two different ways, but it's two different endpoints.
Okay.
So the way we all have to pretty much have the same kind of treatment, which is primarily talk therapy,
Hmm.
and with a therapist who is willing to work with your alters, who is not afraid of your alters, who welcomes them into the therapy room, and who wants to hear their stories, because that's how you heal. Because as your alters tell their stories to someone who is safe and gives them reality checks, then gradually the walls of dissociation between the alters lower, and they and then you get to know each other. Yeah, you get to know your alters. You get to know who this is and who that person is, and your alters may disagree with each other sometimes, and sometimes they're really supportive of each other. All of them exist in order to save your life. They exist in order to save our lives. And so we have to learn to love them, even though we're really ticked off that we even have this disorder and that they are screwing up my life. These are the things we say to each other
Yeah.
when we have DID friends.
You're being
But
real. You're being vulnerable. You're
yeah,
sharing the raw thing. And I appreciate that because people need to hear that because it's not like, oh, you go to therapy, all done.
no, definitely not. And ultimately, in the end, we have to love. We have to love our alters, because when we love our alters, we're loving ourselves.
Yep. You
And
have to love
then,
yourself.
so when that happens, then there are two different tracks. So everyone with DID has to go through that. I would also note that there are medications for secondary symptoms, for anxiety and depression and so on and so forth. But there is no medication that simply addresses DID. The only thing that addresses DID is having those sessions with your therapist, about and with yourself, to hear what your alters have to say. So that's how we heal. But
That's a
some
validation of
people,
what really took place
yes,
because the altars have all the different stories. So it's the
exactly.
validation of what really took place, the validation of this story, the validation of this story, the validation of this story. Then you can put the puzzle all together, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. And so what happens, um, uh, which is actually, I'm going to jump in with something I didn't
Oh,
prepare
that's
you
fine.
for. But this is the third phase of treatment. And we didn't talk about the first two, but the third phase of treatment would be sort of integrating all this information together so that you as a person know everything and everyone knows everything. And for some of us, we go ahead and our alters integrate into one. They call it fusing. I don't like that word, because my alters are still there. But they trust me. And so they rarely come out and, say anything or do anything. I face things as one person, but I have, so Mike was the one who carried anger. So I still have that, I can feel it when Mike's getting angry inside of me. And Laura was the professional who could handle anything professionally. So hey, she's out here talking to you right now, but she's not, because it's me. Because we're not separate anymore, we're all one. But some people choose to remain separate in parts, and we call that functional multiplicity. And what that means is that all the other symptoms of abuse and dissociation have been healed, but the system, which is what we call the whole collection of alters and how they relate to each other, the whole system has decided that they do not want to integrate, that they want to, or they do not want to fuse, that they want to remain separate but collaborative. And so there again, you might have someone who's not in therapy anymore, who's high functioning, and who still has parts, because they've chosen to do that. In my case, it really wasn't my choice. My my parts integrated on their own, very, very organically and gently. And
Wonderful.
we had some conversations about it, and I was trying to encourage them to do that, and some of them were resisting. And then I went to Martha's Vineyard, and there it just happened, and so yeah, so the treatment is the same or mostly the same for most people, but the end result can be different based on what their choices are.
Okay. Well, we talked a little bit about something I just realized we didn't get to like the end of that. You mentioned about how the faith played a part in that, but then you ended up becoming a pastor. How did you go from I don't believe in God and I have to pray this every day because my gut says so to becoming a pastor? What was that journey about?
I think that my faith journey was intimately involved with my healing journey. As a small child, I yearned for God, but I couldn't believe in God because my parents didn't, and you just don't when your parents.
Yeah, you got to do what they say, right? They said you don't want to be stupid and weak, so.
Right. And and your parents are a sort of God for us when we're little. We look to them as being the creator, the giver, the carer. I mean, that's who God is.
They're bigger than us. They're in charge of everything.
That's right. Yeah, and they can take out retribution on us too. If yeah. But I want to say that my journey into atheism through my parents was authentic. I mean, it was a real search, and I became an existentialist after I read Jean-Paul Sartre. And I had all these thoughts in my head, and I don't believe in God. And then I married my husband, and he was an ex-Catholic, and he didn't believe in God. So we had this little godless family. And I did start towards the end of that marriage, before I knew he was having an affair, but still, while I was, I'd started to feel some. I can look back and realize that my sense of self was starting to peel away, but I didn't know that. And I felt like I started to feel uncomfortable with. I still was an atheist, but I was uncomfortable with sort of the negative ways that my family talked about people with faith. And it was just a very slow thing. I told you about my one prayer. The prayer I prayed before that was really in the beginning, before I had no idea that God answered prayers. I just prayed, God, give me strength, give me wisdom. God, give me strength, give me wisdom. That was just to stay alive. That was just to cope with every minute of every day. Wow. But about a year later, I looked back and I thought, I am getting a little stronger, and I think I'm a little smarter now about some things. And is God answering my prayers? I was really stunned by that, but I still didn't believe in God. I couldn't go there. And so I was hired by a group of parents to start a Quaker school. And so they interviewed me a number of times, and we really connected, and I knew they wanted the kind of teaching that I could provide, and I thought they might offer me the position. So after one of the interviews, I said to them, I need to be honest with you. I really, I've loved interviewing with you, and I hope you offer me the position, but you need to know before you do that, that I don't believe in God. Well, these women and men looked at me and they said, in different ways, they said, that's just fine. We know that you have a spirituality that will help our children grow. Don't you worry about that. So I went away. Wow. And then I think the next week they offered me the position. So I was so Quakers believe there's that of God in every person. And Quakers also sit in an hour of silence every week, a contemplative space out of which people will sometimes share and speak words from God. And it was the perfect place for me because I wasn't capable of believing in any doctrine or dogma at that time, but I needed a place to heal. And I would tell the children every week in meeting for worship that there's that of God in every one of you, because that's what Quakers say. And, after about a year of doing that, I thought to myself, I don't feel like I'm lying. I feel like I'm telling the truth when I say that. So these little things just started happening and happening. I became very involved. I did receive my faith as a Quaker. And then a number of years later, I wanted to experience more liturgy, a little more form to my faith. So I had become a principal then. My son had moved back in with me, and my daughter was nearby, and my other two children were nearby. And so things were getting better and better. And I just walked. I always laugh and say this. I chose the church I went to for deep theological reasons. Basically, I didn't know anything about church. I just looked around my neighborhood and found the biggest church I could find. And I could walk to. And I walked down there, and it was the United Church of Christ. And I was like, wow, there was a beautiful service, and the pastor's sermons were just spoke so directly to me. And so I stayed there, and I started to become involved in the church, and I went to retreats. I led retreats, and eventually I took classes, and eventually I prayed myself into seminary. And it's a much longer story than I'm sharing with you, but that's sort of the quick outline.
Well, thank you. That is fascinating. It's like, it amazes me the grace and gentleness that God reaches for us with. Yes. In my book, I called him the pursuer, because I tried to prove he didn't exist, because of all different reasons. That's not the point. But if he's the pursuer, he didn't give up on me. And his gentleness, his grace, and he gave you those visceral things, and little by little by little, because he knows where you were, what you needed, and met you right where you are. And that's something I want to offer up to my audience. Wherever you're at, God loves you. Pray whatever prayer you can come up with, just like how Lyn did. You don't need to mimic anybody. Just reach for him, and he'll reach back, because he loves you. And he does a miraculous healing things. Sometimes it takes longer than other times, but we get there, right? You got there. You'll be still working on. Life is a daily thing.
It is.
So how can people
Absolutely.
connect with you, and tell them the name of your book again?
The name of my memoir is called Crazy, Reclaiming Life from the Shadow of Traumatic Memory. It's published by Kohler Books, and it will be released on January 3rd, 2022. It is actually on pre-order on Amazon and Barnes & Noble online right now. So if you're interested in it, you can go to their sites and put the name of the book in, and you can find it. You can also go to my website, www.lynbarrett.com. I'll spell that for you, www.lynbarrett.com. And you will find a lot more information about me and what I offer. You'll find about my book. Can read some reviews of it. So I've just started a promotion this week where anyone who pre-orders and emails their pre-order receipt to me, the first 50 people who do that will get a free tote bag that has a picture of the cover on it. But you have to go through my website in order to do that. Okay. The other thing I'd like to share, Danielle, is that I have been on my website is a weekly blog about living with D.I.D. and what it's like. It's meant to be informational and inspirational, to hold out hope for people who are really in the depths, because I might look like I'm great right now, and to be frank, I am. But it's been 20 years since I integrated. And so for 20 years, I was I was suicidal every day. I was in pain every day. I was experiencing memories and fighting back against them every day. And so people with DID, I don't want to send the image that it's easy, because it isn't. It is so hard, and we need inspiration. And I want to be an inspiration to show people that there are seasons of our lives, and there's another season coming for you. So hang in there, and here are some grounding techniques, or here's some ideas to help with this or that.
And you have a
So
free ebook called D.I.D. Unpacked, right?
I do.
I'll grab the link to that and include it in the show notes with this stuff.
Great. And I would love to hear from any of your viewers, Danielle. There is a contact form that they can go to and fill out and reach out to me. One other thing that I have started writers' workshops for people with dissociative disorder. And we meet every other week. We have one in the afternoon Eastern time and one in the evening Eastern time every 2 weeks. And it's a safe place to bring your writing, because the people who come understand what you've been through or what you're going through. And
awesome.
yeah, and it's another way to heal, and it's another way to communicate with your parts.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, Lyn. I will definitely get the link to that free little book that you have and include information about your workshops and stuff. And thank you for sharing with my audience today. I just really appreciate you being so vulnerable and candid with everyone.
Danielle, it's really been an honor and a blessing for me to be here, and thank you for inviting me. And if talking with you helps one person out there, then we've done our job, right?
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. I'll see you in a minute. Well, thank you everyone for being with us today. That was just fascinating to hear Lyn's story of her struggle in the midst of DID, not knowing what it was, struggle to integrate out of it, and just how she is working to help other people. If you know anyone who you even think might be struggling with this, maybe not, maybe you grab a copy of that free ebook for yourself to read up on it, to see, so you can educate yourself or pass it along to someone who needs it. And just remember, I love you. I'm Danielle Burnock from DanielleBurnock.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive. Mwah.